I'm going to hand it over to our 2020 president, Wayne Gauthier, and he's going to just give a quick update on what's going on in the market.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, Joe and your team. Thank you all for being able to speak with us this morning. I think it's great for all of us to understand, how we're all working together and what all this has impacted your roles in the county and keeping us all afloat. Being a Chesterfield County resident, I'm very grateful. So one of the things that I've been asked to just address for you is sort of some little bit of numbers, and most importantly, though, I think is the attitude and the sentiment in the area right now. We're still seeing, it feels like a high degree of buyer confidence. We're still seeing properties that are in the right condition, good location, right price, still selling. I mean, that's going in through Chesterfield as well as the rest of the market. We're seeing that while we've had some sellers who have decided that maybe it is better to go ahead and reduce or actually withdraw their house from the market a little bit, but they're not saying they're not going to sell. They're just going to delay and sell a little later. So we're seeing, I think one of the words we've heard is a pause, not a complete termination of their desire to sell, but just we're going to push it back a little bit and wait and see how this is. So what we're grateful for is the ability to continue to work. As many of us feel, housing is such a fundamental need and it's such an important economic component to our area. We're grateful that we've been able to work together to continue to be able to help make these transactions happen and get people to their real estate goals and get them into housing, because some buyers and sellers don't have an option right now. We don't want anybody homeless if we can help it. The great thing that we're seeing numbers-wise is that we're seeing, our biggest challenge is the number of homes that are actually for sale, but we've actually seen in Chesterfield that this year, the number of homes that are on the market has increased slightly, which is ideal, but it's still a lower number from more of our historical trends. In many cases, we're looking at, if we had no new inventory come on, in some neighborhoods and areas, less than a month and a half to 2 months. Other areas, maybe a little longer, especially down in deeper Chesterfield, some of the homes may be taking a little bit more time to go to the market, but we are seeing that our homes are maintaining their prices. We're not seeing a huge discount happening in most of the sales. Matter of fact, we're looking at the list to sell ratio in Chesterfield actually is higher than that of our average for the entire area, meaning that we're taking a little less than on average, less than a 3% discount at about a 97.1% percentage of list price, versus the entire MLS is closer to about a 4.5% discount. So our owners and sellers are seeing the value of living in Chesterfield, thank goodness, and we want to be able to maintain that. And so again, the sentiment is that we still feel confident that we are a great place to live, to raise your family, to run a business and live. And, at that point, I don't think there's anything else to say, but, again, we're seeing, we want to be able to maintain this confidence as we go forward. And at that point, I just want to say thank you and good luck to everybody, as we're going forward and figuring our way out from this. Okay. Thank you very much. Laura?
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks for that context. And I want to add my thanks to Dr. Joe Casey and his team for joining us this morning. We know that to join us, you have stepped away from what must feel like a 24/7. I thought you had a 24/7 job before this. I think now, I'm not sure how you put more hours in the day, but we've had the opportunity to work with Dr. Casey in prior lives. He was in Hanover and when they went through the recession, had to pivot, thought outside the box with how he would help deploy some of the county employees. So he had that experience, and he came over to Henrico, and we had the privilege of working with Dr. Casey when he led was the point person for the meals tax referendum in Henrico. I believe that was in 2014. So we were thrilled when he took the top job in Chesterfield. I can't believe it's been 4 years, but he probably feels like it has. Anyway, Joe, I thought I would start with just asking you to give our folks a little bit of context, a little bit of kind of a window into your life and your work. What was your kind of a day in the life of a county administrator prior to COVID, and then what is it like today?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Laura, and thank you everybody for attending. And I view this not the 1 hour type Zoom session just for us, but for any and all of you to seek out information that we may have to help you out, that you may have actually to help us out. So these are the partnerships that, again, to Laura and Elizabeth and Joe, who have all been very, very engaged pre-pandemic and even more so post. So kudos to your organization and kudos to letting us have a seat at your table, and for you also attending the seat that the table we set for you. Laura is correct. I mean, the jobs of a county administrator, for those that don't know, I report to the 5 elected officials of the Board of Supervisors. Each one of them in Chesterfield County represents over 70,000 people. So you would imagine the diversity of our people here, the diversity of the needs, the abilities for them to communicate by a phone, email, postings and social media again, lend itself to a 24/7 type world. I do think many people in Chesterfield, at least, and businesses are mindful of what we can do and what we can't do, and listen to what is the role of local government in their lives. And again, I think we've tried to design a local government that best serves them. It's not perfect, and we have learned to pivot. This pandemic itself has taught us how to pivot as a government. You all to pivot as an organization. Businesses have pivoted. People have pivoted. Again, early on, going to the day in the life now, I try to figure out, sitting from the desk I'm in now, of how to be virtual and how to preach to everyone, be safe, stay at home, let's not be dense. Let's try and honor governor's edicts of social gatherings and rules of 10 and 6 feet and so forth. And all of a sudden I realized that, I was in essence alone here in the office. Matt Harris, who has the office next to me, has been here in essence every day, but it gets lonely in these hallways here when everyone is figured out how to be virtual and be safe. So I myself had to figure out how to also walk the walk, and I began working out of home. So as you can tell, one of the nuances of working out of home, where you pretty much are on the phone all day. There are Zoom calls, there are what we use Microsoft Teams here, meetings, and so forth. A lot of them are not necessarily, again, in person, and a lot of them are not necessarily even video related. So I've tried to remind myself that these are not normal times. And as you can tell, I have a beard now. And again, I haven't grown one since, post 9/11, right after that time period, and just sort of a reflection of non-normal times back then. And the biggest difference for me growing a beard now and then is I now have gray hair. And if I'm playing
more salt.
and if I'm playing Santa Claus in December of this year, that's not a good thing, for personal and professional reasons. But, the day in the life, before I kind of get into my, and this is something for many of you, and again, I know the realty profession is almost one that it was virtual, quite frankly, and how you may work with your clients and prospects. But I don't know if you've experienced sort of the same things, but when you are working out of your home, you realize a few things. Right now, my daytime household is my wife, Suzanne, and who's a teacher, and my son, Jack, who is a college student, who are both online. So we scramble to find both quiet spots in the house and also fight for whatever Wi-Fi availability exists in the house. So usually I'm relegated to the screen porch is where I can get most of my work done. But what I do get to see, and I'd never seen it before, is my wife as a teacher doing a job that she was born to do, as most other teachers were. This online learning environment, she is the most caring and attentive person to the life of a child. So again, I never had experienced seeing her in action, and I'm amazed by it. I'm actually probably more amazed by my son, Jack, the college student, who continues to not wake up until after 1 p.m. each day. So how people who are wired to be able to sleep that long, I have no idea. But again, I'm amazed by that as much as anything else going on nowadays. My other person in the house is my other son, Harrison, who actually works each day. And interesting enough, he has a DC apartment he had shared with his girlfriend, but both of them have gone to their parents' homes because they'd rather be in the home comfort and the safety than a large apartment in Washington, DC, as they both telework in different ways. So, again, the pre-pandemic routines are all gone. There's no morning exercise anymore. I don't even know when to eat breakfast or lunch, quite frankly. In my steps, probably they were about 10,000 a day, and now I'm lucky to get 250, quite frankly. So anyhow, it's just a different world. As far as this environment we're in also, it's just, I used to have meeting after meeting, but sometimes I'll be in the field. Sometimes I get to see people. I actually have interpersonal interactions with people, be able to read body language, thank people face to face for what they have done. That's a big impediment in my job. And so to switch from every hour to a different phone call, a different platform, while it can be productive, those interpersonal relationships are hindered. Fortunately, I had a lot of good relationships already that, we can do those things by video, but I do feel for that new employee, new worker, new customer who is dealing with strangers in a non-face-to-face world. I also recognize the fact that there are a lot of young people or those that have young children that it's hard for them to telework in that environment, as their son or daughter just cherishes the moments to play with them. So the bottom line is I usually keep about 100 things on what I call my to-do list that I have to be versed on, that I might get asked about by board members, citizens, or business or other partners. And basically now I just have one thing on my list, and that's this pandemic with 100 top subtopics to it. But I've appreciated everybody around me. I've really tried to do my best through weekly messages of relaying just how much I care about what they are doing and care about them as a person just as much as a worker. And I've sort of, taken the title of what I call ringmaster at a circus. I'm not the talent on display. The three rings that have our employees and people working together are the true talent. I just simply get to introduce them. But I do miss the interpersonal relationships. And again, we may be in a position someday soon, hopefully, to do something we once called a handshake.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that insight. I think it's always helpful for folks to see kind of a little bit behind the curtain, so I appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about the finances of the county. Obviously, Chesterfield is not immune to the economic challenges of the pandemic. You and your team have had to kind of start again on your budget, cut 50 million or more. And so talk to us a little bit about how you make the strategic decisions in collaboration with your team and then the Board of Supervisors to make cuts that are necessary, but are ones that, to the best of your ability, do not impact the daily lives of your citizens. Sure,
and maybe just prior to getting into some numbers and strategies per the budget, I think you, Laura, or Elizabeth, or Joe, I sent just a variety of PDFs and other files out last night. Maybe it was early this morning, quite frankly. But
it was a little after 1, Joe, but we're not counting.
Don't call me out on that, please. But anyhow, that's just an example of one day's worth of data and analytics. This job and the job of those that are also on the phone from Chesterfield is we are data hungry and not just trying to figure out what happened last month or a lag in reporting, but what is happening yesterday sometimes. So, just in my goal to be information sharing during these times, that product I sent you may have or will be getting, but it's just one day's worth of, again, those are just hard files. That ignores all the various other conversations we had. The big difference, frankly, between now and 2008 is that the access to data, the access to timely data, and the tools that are available, even location services on smartphone that actually helps manage and monitor human behavior. It's a little almost too big brother, but as far as understanding what people are doing, it is very valuable data. Pivoting back to the fiscal environment, again, for those that don't know, Chesterfield County is AAA bond rated for over a generation. You don't get that just for being a nice person. You know, it's just a long, long history of, you know, managing your debt appropriately. It's managing your budget by forecasting revenues conservatively, even in good times. And it's not using gimmicks to balance your budgets. So back in the Great Recession, you know, we in Chesterfield, and I did the same in Hanover, it was, I think, around August or so that we got a monthly sales tax report that something seemed wrong. And we started tapping the brakes on in Hanover, and I know Chesterfield did the same. Unfortunately for the Great Recession, as many of you know who lived through it, that foot on the brakes lasted for years. This time, in essence, the economy pre-pandemic was actually performing quite well. We don't have the underlying crises that were existing and metrics that were existing in the banking and in essence, the housing market that was related to it. But having said that, you know, this is how quickly things have changed. So we spend months, I will tell you, sometimes planning and strategizing of how to balance our budget with the revenues, the conservative revenues that are before us. So that culminated in March 11th in a presentation before the board in an open public meeting that was crowded with everybody coming together of how we are going to best serve the citizens and students with our quote unquote proposed budget. 2 weeks later, just 2 weeks later on March 25th at our next board meeting, we told the board, ignore what we said 14 days ago. In that boardroom meeting, we only had 2 citizens who attended despite all our warnings of trying to stay home and watch on television and communicate by other manners, you know, were in attendance. 1 week later, you know, what was months in preparation through March 11th, we had a new budget balanced to the new reality that we knew at that time. And that was subject to new virtual debates through Facebook Live meetings, no person-to-person type community meetings or town halls. 1 week after that, we had our first virtual board meeting with nobody in the board meeting room, including the 5 board members that sat in their own homes. So what a dynamic of a change. So again, pivoting to just the word economy, you know, that word is used a lot. And actually I looked up the definition the other day, and I think it's simply stated that it's basically the wealth of the resources of the country or a region, especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services. So the pandemic, in essence, halted both the production, in many cases, and the consumption at the same time. So what the result was just unemployment claims of record proportions. You know, for a point of reference, in 2019, which again was a good year, calendar 2019, we averaged 90 new unemployment claims per week. Many of these people were able to find jobs within days or weeks of filing. March 26, okay, March 26th of this year, we were told the claims for the prior week was a record 1,970. Remember, we had 90 new claims per week on average in 2019. You know, if you had to draw a bar chart of 90, 90, 90 in a row, and you have a 1,970 mark, that chart looks like there's nothing at the bottom, and all of a sudden, what is happening? So while that was, you know, and again, we were prepared for it. We saw it coming. We saw it coming from the West Coast. But the next week, a new record, 4,200 people filed for unemployment in Chesterfield County. The next week after that, another new record, 5,700 plus people filed. So as surreal as it sounds, the positive news, and then again, I'm using positive in a surreal manner, the next 3 weeks after that, we didn't have any more new records, but the claims themselves were still between 2,600 and 4,000. So that is just what has happened in the course of a month, was about 21,000 plus people filing for unemployment in Chesterfield County. Now there's some positive glimmer to that. You know, we're getting continuing claims now as a figure we're paying attention to, and that's about 13,000 to 15,000. We need to understand what that means and just understand what happened to those other 8,000 or so people. But having said that, this is unprecedented, and in essence, all the job growth since 2012, thereabouts, when the Great Recession ended from a local government perspective, all the job growth basically in Chesterfield County was wiped out in a matter of a month. And just, you know, again, we have to remember this isn't just a statistic. I said a lot of numbers. Each one of those numbers is a person. Each one of those is a household. Each one of them is a is a self-esteem moment of how I can be a provider for myself and my family. Each one of them causes a domino effect, somewhat impacting your industry of hesitation in consumer behavior, of them being consumers themselves. Every 2,000 people in Chesterfield that file for unemployment is an increase of 1% in our unemployment rate. So those are just dynamic statistics that, again, we never really focused upon during the good times. And even quite frankly, we never focused upon them that much even during the Great Recession because of the volume that is occurring now. We are focusing on that daily. Unfortunately, even that statistic is lagging. We're dependent upon the Virginia Employment Commission. You don't file for unemployment locally, you file for unemployment through a state source. The challenge, quite frankly, also is while the federal incentive right now is an additional $600 per week above and beyond what you would normally get from unemployment, and they extended the duration of benefits an additional 13 weeks to ease the pain. And then again, that's policy, and I'm not here to fault the federal government over it, but it does, quite frankly, make it a challenge to bring back some of these workers sooner, especially retail and restaurants, because they are actually making a higher wage staying home on unemployment than coming back to the workplace. So that's the dynamic of the economics. Now, pivoting back again to what we are in doing as a local government to quote unquote weather the recession, to borrow a term from 2008. There are many tools in the toolbox. Some are one-time tools of deferring expenses or having a certain source of revenue. They are easier tools to deploy, but they're not sustainable. They work if you have a period of months you're dealing with an issue. We don't know whether this is months or years. So the harder tools are what I call ongoing expenditure reductions. And for comparison purposes, the Great Recession had a $50 million reduction that was deployed in Chesterfield over many months and 2 budget cycles. We've deployed a $50 million reduction in a matter of weeks. And again, these are just odd ways in which to talk. Having said that, we have to recognize that our top 3 priorities are schools, public safety, and infrastructure. We try and find ways to strengthen those during good times and increases, and in bad times, how to mitigate those areas by having them feel the least amount of the decreases. The tools in the toolbox, again, they may be something that you use in your own business models. You basically try and limit your workforce. You hold on to vacancies. We got a lot of attention for quote unquote furloughing 500 positions early on. Basically what those positions were mostly our part-time personnel that weren't having any recordable hours. So they were having $0 paychecks. In fact, quite frankly, those that had eligibility for health insurance were having negative paychecks because they had to write us a check back for their employee coverage. Our furlough policy, in essence, is covering their employee deduction for the next 6 months. So, but again, freezing vacancies, you have early retirement incentives. You basically just try and not spend money on personnel. That's usually the largest component of your budget. You eliminate merit increases. You don't really have career development programs, travel. So again, you have to just tell the workforce, work hard, be appreciative you have a job. Those that have done a good job, there will be a reward for you someday. It's just not today. The other thing you do is you just defer capital projects and reduce what we would consider discretionary spending. That discretionary spending is not necessarily wasteful spending. Sometimes you budget discretionary spending because contingencies arise during the year for which a department can solve on their own. Now they don't necessarily have those contingencies embedded in their budget. What we have done though, again, focused on public safety, human service programs, major maintenance, which has been a perennial topic in Chesterfield. We are not going away from that. We really need to continue to invest in our facilities. The schools got a lot of attention, and we're working with them hard too to preserve that major maintenance component. We are continuing with some key projects that I think you and your association would be appreciative of, including the finishing out of all the school-related projects from our 2013 referendum, which pivoted renovations of schools to new schools, as you may know. As well, the new Magnolia Green Elementary School is still budgeted for, and it's an active project. We are holding off on our fall referendum. And again, a referendum is not just putting a question out and borrowing monies. A referendum is a community engagement exercise. We can't have community engagement exercises in a pandemic. So that's a relationship and a trust you got to build with the people. So again, we're just putting a pause on that. We can do a lot of preliminary work on some things, that would be otherwise part of the question, soft costs maybe. But as far as the hard question and the hard sell, that is actually being postponed. But again, we look at a lot of indicators daily. And, again, sometimes we have to look back over our shoulder for people that, such as the state, that we got to be careful how they balance their budget, because just as they did in 2008, and they're doing a little bit today, they balance the budget on our backs. And I think that we're exploring it more, but it appears at the 11th hour, what is the grand tours tax, which again, you all play a role in that. There is a local share that comes to us, to our clerk of the circuit court, for the recordations and so forth. That grand tours tax locally was $1.4 million a year. We are now being told that the state is going to hold back that local share for themselves. So again, you have to look up and down and all around. Again, out of all the questions, this is probably the longest one I'll be answering, only because I think it's the most relevant to try and give you a perspective of what we're really spending outside of the health and safety, the disproportionate amount of all of our time with this. I do have Matt Harris, again, the Deputy County Administrator over this area. He's on the call. He's one of the best in the business, quite frankly, at local economics and fiscal stewardship. He makes my job in this area easy, even though I've done his job before in Henrico and in Hanover. I don't need to do his job here because he does it very well. So, Matt, if you're on the line, if you don't mind just unmuting for a moment or two, if you need to extrapolate, or Matt, what Matt also does is correct anything I might have said wrong. So that he's my fail-safe on that. So, Matt, are you still there?
Joe, I am here. I think you did a nice job with summarizing that. I think the only thing I would add to your commentary is that the budget's going to be a bit of a moving target for us, and it's something we're going to continue to evaluate on a monthly basis as we move ahead. But I think those core principles that you referenced, schools, public safety, and infrastructure, will continue to be the things that we'll protect. And you may have said it, but it bears repeating. We're actually increasing our support for local education in Chesterfield County by almost $10 million, despite cutting $50 million out of the rest of the budget. And I think that's a real testament to the feedback that the board received in terms of what's important, and that's has really had an impact on a lot of the support areas and other places in the county that are having to work extra hard to fill in those gaps. But I think it speaks loudly to the priorities in Chesterfield County and the commitment we have to those core areas like education. We just closed the Magnolia Green transaction this week, actually. So that project, which is very meaningful to Western Chesterfield, is moving ahead as nothing else had happened. So we are really dedicated to those three areas. So regardless of what happens or economic disruptions may lie around the bend, that will be our continued philosophy in terms of budgeting and financial matters in Chesterfield.
Thanks, Matt. That was the end of that question. Is there another question, Laura or Elizabeth?
Sure. So, as you know, Joe, we are very grateful as an industry that the governor did not, his executive order 53 did not force the closure of the real estate profession. Our members have been able to practice virtually, have been able to practice in compliance with his order. And honestly, I think before his order even was issued, you picked up the phone, you called me, and you said, what do we in Chesterfield need to do in order for you, your members to continue to practice? So I say that because I want everyone on the call to know that that conversation we had probably mid-March, you were quite proactive. And so I want to say thank you. And if you can just kind of extrapolate for those on the call, what Chesterfield and your team, Jesse and his folks, have been doing to ensure that, that the trains run on time as far as our industry is concerned, that development can continue, and some of the efficiencies that you all have actually developed during this time in order to, again, kind of expedite the development in the real estate industry.
Sure. Well, again, housing is and will continue to be, a huge part of Chesterfield's economy. And one of the mindsets I, even did during my interview with Chesterfield back in 2016 is, people are not a cost, if you will. Sometimes you get caught into what's the impact of a household upon your local government services. And I view people as an asset. I view, a diverse array of people as an asset for a diverse array of jobs. And I think you need to, in essence, have the housing and the diverse housing to really foster a local economy, and not a local economy that gets on in a car every day and drives 25 miles away to make a living. So as much as Chesterfield has grown and the housing has grown significantly just in these last 4 years, the prouder element of it is the jobs actually have grown at a faster rate locally. So, again, you don't necessarily have to say, no people here, let's just create jobs. They both work hand in glove. And I think there's a mindset in Chesterfield now that again, a household, a diverse household helps Garrett Hart to help recruit an array of businesses. This virtual world that we're living in, quite frankly, and the teleworking that's occurring, it only helps Chesterfield out from a local economy. People are getting more and more comfortable staying closer to home. I know myself, just speaking for me, I drive a half an hour. I live in Chesterfield, but it takes me a half an hour to get to work. Well, 1 hour of my day now is not spent in a car. And again, I don't know what I do with the time necessarily, but I feel like I am being more productive. So again, the hundreds of millions of dollars in investment annually on the housing related construction is just, again, part of our business. Now, having said that, as we plan for the future, we're really relying on industry to continue to provide that housing to keep us competitive in the labor market and the businesses so that we can further expand our tax base. We rely upon the home builders. We rely upon you to challenge us, with new products to make us attractive. You have had roles with us in the Midlothian and Jeff Davis corridors and their special area plans, and we are pivoting to the next generation with those plans of live, work, play, learn with you. And again, we just even had a zoning case at the last meeting in Randolph Pond in Midlothian. That was in the Planning Commission. Again, a very unique product for that area, but a product that is, again, compliant with the special area plan that's going to serve a way in which people can live and work and walk around in a community. So, but you and your industry, what it takes and all the players it takes to create a house and even to serve a house once built. There's a lot of, frailties in all of that line of service. And even in good times, if there's an interruption in amongst any of that, what I would call the interdependence of all the players, that there's a market flaw that arises. It starts with the site acquisition zoning, adjusting products to changing markets, your construction suppliers, construction labor, bank financing, and especially in your line of business. And I know I was a part of that too when I was selling my house in Hanover. The domino, if you will, contingency of me wanting to sell my home before buying a home, and me buying a home from someone who needed to sell their home or to someone else. That domino just must be something you have to pay so much attention to. But pivoting into the home sales and home construction markets in Chesterfield and maybe how we're able to continue them. Again, we're not doing business as usual, but what we have done, and Jesse Smith will get on here in a moment, hopefully, we have just done so many ways in which we are serving people differently. I give so much credit to all of our community development departments for not, following standard rules, if you will, of face-to-face communications and processes. They themselves, I think, are actually feeling really good about themselves because they're feeling good that they are serving the development community in manners, quite frankly, that I think, we may have been the leaders in the state in some respects. I'm only saying that because we're getting calls from many people, many well-established localities from far away on that. So, Jesse, do you have anything to possibly add to that as some of the things that have been done? And this is Jesse Smith, the Diffic.
Yeah, sure, Jeff. Hey, this is Jesse, and I'll include my information in the chat bar if anybody needs to reach me. We've done a variety of different things, including pivoting to some online submittals. So we've managed to kind of MacGyver some things together so that folks can submit plans online. All of our building inspections operations continue. Some of that is being done virtually. So those folks continue to work. In terms of this particular audience and the realtors, certainly if you guys have questions, if your buyers have questions about what infrastructure is going to be provided, for example, folks continually say, hey, when's the Poway Parkway going to be built? When are these certain things going on? Please, reach out to me, email me, give me a call. We're happy to help you through those things. In terms of new construction activity, that is still moving forward hot and heavy. Those folks are continuing to record lots, they're continuing to build. So we have not seen a downtick in any of that. And permit activity has actually increased over what it was at this time last year. So again, things are looking bright. We see this as being more of a disruption than anything, and just look forward to continuing to work with you all in the future.
Thank you, Jesse. Joe, I think you're echoing some of the sentiments that we heard when we talked with John Vitolkas earlier this week, which is you got to break some rules here, that this is uncharted territory. And so if we're going to respond in a way that helps folks, you got to be innovative, you got to be outside the box, but ultimately you got to be willing to break a few rules. So we appreciate the innovation. Also, we know our industry has been able to be fairly robust during these times, but small businesses are hurting, and they've been hurting through this. They will be hurting for quite some time. And I know, because we've been in conversation with Dan Cohen, with Garrett Hart, some other folks on your team, that you're particularly interested and focused on how you help small businesses come out of this. And so if you could speak a little bit to what you and your team are doing to try to assist small businesses as they maneuver through a new reality.
No, thank you, Laura. The small businesses, and again, it may be an old cliche, but they are the foundation really of a local economy. These businesses that have 10 people that hire an extra one person, that's a 10% growth in their business. And that doesn't make a front page story. But we have, hundreds, if not thousands of those businesses during good times, adding 1 to 2 people at a time and slowly but surely growing. They don't make the news as much as, one company coming in with 100 new jobs. And so, again, they do it quietly, but deliberately. It goes without saying the first people and first businesses that felt this impact were the smaller and established, restaurants or retail. Some were forced to close or pivot to a takeout. Just like I called you, Laura, day one really of this, I called Jack Berry with Richmond Regional Tourism. And I said, we need to do something to help market these places, because even the ones that were doing takeout, you didn't know that they were open. The parking lots were empty. There's, the windows had no one sitting at tables, so let's create some kind of sign, some symbol, if you will, for the whole region. And to their credit, they came up with, a nice visual display that someone could hang in their window. We went out actually with our staff and delivered all of those signs to all of those restaurants as quick as possible. In conjunction with that, economic development began a new website, I think a geospatial one, where all places who are open, were plotted on the map. We don't have a meals tax, so you hear some localities giving some forgiveness of penalties or interest on meals tax. So they didn't have that burden to us, so we didn't have to even have that topic. The hotel industry was the next one that was falling apart quickly. We as a locality, we eliminated any of the penalties and interest on delinquent lodging taxes. Fortunately, in Chesterfield, we've only had 4 hotels actually close. We've been in discussions again with some of the major hotel owners. Some of them are actually very, I wouldn't say pleased, but they were able to survive in parts of Chesterfield, especially the Chester area. There's a lot of construction, a lot of activity where workers are coming in from out of the area that are using the Chester hotels as their base of operation. So again, the occupancy rates aren't 80 or 90%, but they may be 25 to 40%, which again enables a hotel to survive. Another call we made day one was with Eric Terry, he's the executive director of the Virginia Hospitality and Travel Association. So we're trying to work with him and what we can do to best position the hotel and hospitality industry. we recognize that commercial and residential, especially those that are renting, they may not necessarily get a real property tax bill, but they're getting a water and sewer bill. So we've helped out the tenants of all these places, commercial and by default residential. We have a no cutoff policy for utilities, but again, now there's no penalty and interest. So last billing cycle, we would have actually charged $200,000 to people that probably didn't have the money to charge it, didn't need that extra stress in their lives. So our public utilities department, in essence, ate, if you will, that $200,000 write-off. We're trying to make things simpler, and we're not doing any additional fees for credit card payments. We're also looking at what are less punitive ways of our tax penalties and interest. Again, we do need some type of cash flow to operate. We need cash flow to pay for teachers and police officers and firefighters. So, we can't simply say nobody pay us any money for the foreseeable future, but how can we have a compassion factor and target those that are in need of it? The Code of Virginia, unfortunately, doesn't really give you much flexibility. You have to treat everybody the same. But again, we're going to try and be smart with that. We're going to try and be innovative. One of the things that we're leading the cause on, and Eric Terry has actually even talked to the governor's office and the ABC department, is what I'm calling, al fresco options for restaurants. Very likely today the governor will illustrate better what phase 1 reopening is, but there will be restrictions on restaurants that they may only be 50% or less capacity. And again, I'm not a restaurant owner, but the business model of them able to survive may need a 70, 80% type of occupancy rate of their tables. We're going to change our laws and rules, enable them to spill out front on their sidewalks into some of these spatial parking lots that can maybe be roped off. So there can be dining experiences. Even retail stores can push their goods outside. I think, quite frankly, from a human behavior standpoint, customers are going to feel first good about going to an outdoor venue that feels very spatial than going into a tighter quarters, whether it's retail or a restaurant. Again, the success of this, quite frankly, is ABC rules being relaxed. So again, the businesses can make the margins on the alcohol sales. So again, if we can pull that off here in Chesterfield, or pull it off on behalf of the state, even as a pilot, we are willing to change whatever stereotype rules and regulations we have, saying you need to sell your goods and wares within the confines of 4 walls. So, touching on both those topics, again, the business world, this may be a good opportunity for Garrett Hart actually to step in and again, help give additional context to what I might have said, and his role, quite frankly, and the leadership role he's playing in the region amongst economic development with the program called Chesterfield Launch, and again, Chamber RVA and Retail Merchants Association. Garrett? Garrett may not be there, so I set him up. He must be working really hard on something.
He just dropped off.
Yeah, it looks like Garrett had to move on to another topic, another meeting.
If he comes on at the end, Joe, just bring him back in then maybe. How about that?
All right, that sounds like a plan.
Okay. So let's, in case, we'll see if he comes back, but I want to ask just a couple more questions and then we'll open it up to folks on the call. I know, Joe, that you have had a long-standing commitment to affordable housing, everything from homelessness to home ownership. I know that in the dead of January at 4 a.m., you helped Homeward with our point-in-time count, where we go out into the woods, into the streets, and literally wake up homeless people and talk to them about their situation, and you did that. So I know that the challenge of affordable housing in all its aspects is something that you care about personally. Talk to us a little about what the county is doing to address a need that has become exacerbated, obviously, by COVID-19. And we needed more affordable housing units prior to COVID. This only demonstrates how much we need those as a region. So talk to us a little bit about what you and your team are doing in that regard.
Sure. No, again, affordable housing by default is a necessity, because there are workers, there are professions, right or wrong, that are fulfilling for a worker to work, a worker to maybe provide for the necessities of their family, food, clothing, and then it's shelter. And again, to the degree that the shelter cost of it is too high, then the models of them and the models of some of these jobs that we need throw off an economic model, quite frankly. You know, I myself actually, you know, lived in an apartment till I was in first grade, a 2-bedroom apartment with my parents and my sister, and I shared a bedroom with my sister until we moved when I was in first grade. And you know, and I didn't realize it then, but you know, I sensed looking back and going visiting the place I lived in that was probably an affordable housing type living situation. You know, still enjoyed the people, still enjoyed the neighbors in the community, enjoyed the schooling. So all the other stereotypes of affordable housing don't necessarily need to exist. You know, you can be living in these areas and integrated into all the quality of life attributes that anybody has. So having said all that, you know, the key to this is, again, working with many people in the industry, many non-profit partners, quite frankly. One of the things Chesterfield's done specifically is our community development block grant and home fundings, federal related programs. You know, prior to me getting here, and really just they were getting ready to pivot anyhow, but I was an advocate to it, is let's make these more deliberate. Let's use these monies to really impact and change people's lives, instead of just like viewing it as, you know, parsing out contributions to this, that, and the other thing. So we have about $2 million a year, for which about 80% of it is going to housing related activities. We got about close to 900,000 more just recently in relation to COVID funding for CDBG programs. And we're in the solicitation stage right now and evaluation, for which I sense a lot of that will also go back into housing related activities. And those are the nonprofits, if you will, that we will partner with. You know, Joe, Elizabeth, and Laura, you were integral to this partnership to affordable housing, or housing affordability, I think was the title of it. And again, we in Chesterfield were at the table. Dan Cohen with community enhancement, a department that was just created 2 years ago. But if you ever met Dan, you think he's been doing this job in Chesterfield for 50 years, quite frankly. He's just born to be a leader in this topic, born to be a leader in Chesterfield. And he has done wonders of not just with the product and the manners, but just the changing of people's behaviors of it. So I know we helped you quite a bit in reviewing and creating the framework. I was there for the unveiling in January, which amazingly was only 3 months ago. And I think it was a room full of so many people. And actually, I don't think I've actually said a room was full in the last month. So it's just sad to think how many people were there. And in hindsight, sometimes it was the last time I saw a lot of these people, quite frankly. You know, we're also working, if you didn't know, anything that's VHDA or HUD-related residential funding, there are requirements of set-asides for affordability. Chesterfield County, we put those things on consent agenda. You know, it's not a big to-do, it's not a big community meeting or uproar of who's moving in and who's doing what. We view it that there's an appropriateness to the business of it. Our developers say that there's a business to it. We respect their insight. I think we know, so again, we had 3 or 4, if I recall, just on our February agenda. One was, I think, an expansion of the Westchester Green neighborhood area off of the Jeff Davis corridor. So again, other localities, those things would be making headlines. But no, these are welcomed amenities because the quality and the affordability can go together. So the last thing I'll say is, you know, we have the most mobile homes in Chesterfield County. And quite frankly, there are people who live in mobile homes that are making $80,000 to $100,000 a year. They like their neighbors, they like the community. There are good mobile home parks, there are good landlords at mobile home parks. There are also bad ones. And again, we are taking the bad ones one by one to task. We're taken to court if need be. So, you know, as we get in and knock on doors and trying to help people out, you know, there's a trust that has to be earned and built, and it doesn't happen overnight. Dan Cohen's, again, only been here for 2 years, but he is building that trust. So I think these people are realizing is we are here to serve them as a citizen. They are no different than any other citizen. We are not here to displace. That's not an easy exercise. There's lots of case studies across the country where it's easy to displace and let somebody else worry about where people go to. If these people have roots here, we want to nourish those roots and improve it. And then if that improvement is, quite frankly, getting even simply a new mobile home on top of an existing site where a mobile home has been there for 40 years and has outlasted its useful life and is a fire hazard, we will do that. We will work with them. Last in the affordability is, as you know, there are many landlords that are having a hard time maybe making their payments to their financial institutions, and the tenants themselves are having a hard time paying their rent. So we're getting involved in understanding, what a landlord's financing arrangements are. I believe Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are offering, forgiveness factors to landlords if they don't evict their tenants for similar delinquencies.
Well, so, that we can segue back to Garrett, because he's back with us, and I believe, and I think you believe, that affordable housing is an economic development strategy. People have to be able to afford to live in a jurisdiction if they want to work in that jurisdiction. So, Garrett, you jumped off right when Joe had set you up for the last question to talk a little bit about the retention of the small businesses, how you are helping small businesses throughout this this challenging time. So if you'd like to speak to that.
Thank you, Laura. And I'm sorry I lost my internet just as Joe was doing the economic development speech. I was prepared to follow up, and then I was gone. So I reconnected my phone first, but then now I'm back. I didn't hear all of Joe's information, so I may repeat some. We are pivoting from what we have been doing is helping the small businesses deal with orders 53 and 56 and stay alive while they're closed, or doing reduced businesses by finding the grants and the loans and the PPP and everything, and trying to make that sense of that so that they can get as much help as they can while they're closed. We're pivoting away now to how do we reopen? How do we get in this, small businesses back open? And it's come down to the two key issues that are basically solved in one way. Getting your employees back and getting your customers back. Both are affected by fear. So we have got to do something to make people feel safe to come back into the market, and employees to feel safe to come back to work. We are doing that by providing a best practices manual that will key off of what the governor will release, hopefully in the next few days, about what the requirements are to open up again, and what you'll have to do in order to keep your customers and your employees safe. We're gonna try to add, we're building up a best practices from all over the nation. People are opening up with different ideas, and we're collecting them all. At this point, it's not a time to be, it's time to be creative, but it's also be a time to use what everybody else is doing too. So we're collecting that now through a regional group with the chambers and small business organizations in the region, to have a manual pretty much ready to go by the middle of next week that will provide further clarity on what you need to do to make your customers and your employees feel safe to come back to work. We are also looking to provide PPE and a marketing campaign to let the customers primarily know the businesses that are actually living up to these standards. We're going to have some seal that we create that says, if you agree to do all of these things, you are meeting all the regulations to open back up. Here's a sticker that goes in your window. So hopefully it'll help encourage the customer to come back and return. We'll also use that on their websites and our websites to identify. Joe mentioned early that we put a geospatial restaurant web page in service where you can click and find out the restaurants around you that are doing takeout. We will add a feature to that to show the restaurants that have met this requirement to open back up for in dining. I'm sure Joe talked to you about the idea of letting restaurants and small businesses move out into the parking lot and
Yes.
have more seating. He talked to you about that. Good. Some of the things we're doing. But, when the governor came out and closed the businesses, there were lots and lots of questions between the lines of what can I do and what can I can't do. We're assuming just right now that there are going to be the same number of questions, if not more, on what can I do and how can I do it based on the orders that come out the end of this week or next week for the reopen. So we're going to try to be really, really prepared to answer these questions as quickly as we I'm assuming Joe told you we're facing an issue of employees and the unemployment that they're gonna be reluctant to come back to a job when they're making more money at home.
Yes.
Until, you know.
Yes.
So a lot of our restaurants are telling us that they won't be ready to be back into any kind of in-room dining at any volume before July, because they won't be able to get their employees back.
Right.
So that's going to be slow. I think we'll see more of the salons and the barbershops and hair salons and service industries come back more quickly than we will our restaurants. So, you know, we're going to try to focus on those with the PPE and the social distancing and how many people you can have in your shop and so forth. A couple of things I wanted to comment from Joe's earlier comments. The unemployment rate, the unemployment rate in Chesterfield, the 13,000 steady unemployment rate. You report, when you're unemployed, you report where you live, not where you work. So because of the great work that you guys do, and because of the selling the value of a home in Chesterfield, we have lots of people that live in Chesterfield by choice, as a first choice community, which is a wonderful thing, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But because of that, as the region's unemployment rate goes up, we'll see a big number because the people live in Chesterfield, okay? Chesterfield is lucky in that we are a heavily manufactured sector, the largest in the region, and the largest manufacturing payroll in the state. Manufacturing has not been affected by this. In fact, many of our manufacturers make PPE, DuPont with Tyvek, and a lot of our manufacturers make food and beverages. And those actually demands have gone up. So we have, and also we have Amazon for fulfillment. Those people are all hiring, but you have to have certain skill levels, you know, and if you get laid off from a salon, you're not necessarily going to be able to go in and work the line at DuPont. So there's that gap. But I just wanted to explain why, you know, the unemployment rate is important to us, but it's gonna look big to us because we're the place where people like to live. And that's a really good thing, okay? Because in my world today, we used to go out and sell this wonderful site like the one that's behind me in the picture here, and track the industry here. And then the people came behind the industry for the jobs. It's the other way around now. The industries are chasing the people. So the high quality of life and the value that you guys are putting together in Chesterfield and the school systems and we are attracting the workforce first, and the industries are following. So I need you guys to do what you do every day to, you know, to extract a diverse amount of people and different levels of income and different levels of education and different desires and reasons to be in the region. So then I can sell those people, that skill set to an industry. I think, unless you have any questions, Laura.
No, Eric, that was great. My mantra, and many people on the call are sick of hearing it, but my mantra is people don't buy a house until they first bought into a community's quality of life. So I tip my hat to Joe Casey and all of his team and the teachers who get up every day and teach, and everyone who creates the strong quality of life in Chesterfield is why our members can sell Chesterfield, because they are selling the community, and then somebody decides to buy a home in that community. So thank you for all of that. Joe, we just have a couple of minutes, and I'd like to end by asking you just to reflect on some, you know, just an anecdote or two of where you've really seen some amazing compassion extended, where you've seen people helping people, something that has inspired you in these last 6 to 8 weeks. You gotta unmute. There you go.
Thank you, Laura. It's interesting, you know, we actually say questions, what have I seen? It's unfortunately, I'm not seeing anything other than my laptop. But
True.
it's really what I've heard or I've had conversations with people. But, you know, and I think you set this up nicely. It's really the word is grace, I think, and it's a word you don't hear much, but it's the grace of the citizen and public sector employee interacting with each other in manners, quite frankly, they've never interacted before. You know, it's when the stress of a situation arises that someone rises up. It could be a nonprofit, volunteer, it could be a local government employee, it could just be a lay citizen. But, you know, we have so many stories, and while this one, I'll just reference one. You know, we had a citizen who dropped off their mother at the front door of our closed mental health office with a note that simply said, "I can't take care of my mom anymore." You know, because that person was at their wits' ends. You know, I don't know necessarily the disposition of the mother, but she had a health issue and a little bit of a mental health issue. But I guess, you know, she was the caretaker of her mother and just could not do it anymore. So for her to write a note, attach it to her mother, and drop her at the curb of our mental health office, you know, around 6 p.m. And fortunately, there was somebody in the building, some employee who spent probably the next 8 hours of their life with that person, got them to a hospital, got them tested and treated, and did not leave that person's side until they knew that they were actually in a safe residential setting for at least the next day or two until some more permanent solution could be reached. That's a Jane Doe story that you know you'll never hear that story. There's lots of privacy issues with that story, as you would imagine. But that's a stranger of our mental health employee helping out a stranger. There's a job description to that employee of Chesterfield. That job description doesn't have that compassion to it. So, I hear those things. I talk to the people and to that person. And again, you just can't help but just have a tear in your eye almost when you hear of the stress that someone's going through and how we, in essence, have to inherit that stress but cannot displace it. I couldn't be more prouder, actually, with many other organizations, including your own, who are really trying to put others before yourself. Strangers helping stranger. Feeding programs is probably the one that's the most evident one of how we're all trying to do things. But again, during these times, during these crises, there's no such thing as a job title. Quite frankly, it's people. And again, there's so many people doing so many good things. We have to figure out how to tap that as our source of strength as we reopen or relaunch, as we say here in Chesterfield.
Well, thank you, Joe. I think I don't think we could end on a better note than that. It is my hope that as we come out of this, that we have a long memory when it comes to people helping people, and that really becomes part of our DNA collective as a community going forward. So I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for the time of your staff. So I'm getting a question here about what is the website that notes all the restaurants that are open? Is that on y'all's site?
Garrett knows it best. So Joe, can you let Garrett say it?
Garrett just needs to unmute himself, I think. Yeah. Go ahead, Garrett.
Just Google Chesterfield Eats to Go.
There you go. So, and I will be eating in Chesterfield. I will be helping a restaurant in Chesterfield on Sunday as I socially distance, but visit my mother. So we'll be eating from Sergio's up in Midlothian. So excited about that. So again, thank you to Dr. Casey and his team. It was really a marvelous opportunity to visit with you. Thank you so much for what you do. We're very grateful for you daily. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot them to me afterward, and we'll make sure we get an answer for you. Thanks, everyone.